Welcome again to another Pro Wrestling Guide for Newbies. This is about Golden Age Wrestling. Now I'm going to probably do 2 or 3 videos, maybe 2, of Golden Age wrestlers that are from the 1970s into late 1980s. Nothing in the 90s and 2000s. That's something in a more modern era. So I won't be doing them. I will probably do a more modern or more recent. But this is Golden Age Wrestling. And this is about the WWF. Now, I'm going to go by my own feelings of who I felt at the time really affected me. And a little bit of history of it. Because everyone's got a little bit of history of what they felt about wrestling. And if you go by actual history, these wrestlers I'm going to mention are not the most, not all of them are the most important. But to me, they were very special people. So let's do the first person. Now, my most distinct memory of this person is my most earliest memories of wrestling. Around 1980, 81, I was about 9 or 10 years old at the time. Yes, I was about 9 or 10 years old. Actually, I was about, I was 9 years old back in 1980. I am 46. I'm an old guy. Been watching wrestling for over 30 years. So, this guy I distinctly remember as the first person I can understand as a pro wrestler, and this is Bob Backlund. Now, Bob Backlund, if I remember, has won about 2 or 4 wrestling titles from the WWF. I can't remember distinctly how many titles he has. Either 2 or 4. You can leave a comment below how many titles he had. I believe it might have been 4. One of those title reigns he had was about 4 years long. Understand this, I'm going to say this clearly, not to make it too long. Back in the 70s and 80s, a man who wrestled for a company, when they won the title, didn't usually give up the title within about 2 or 3 months like they do now. Back then, a person could hold them for a year, 2 years. And in this case, he held it about almost 3 to 4 years. He isn't the one that held the longest title reign. That's someone entirely different. But he is one of the 2 longest title reign holders of the WWF. I remember him very clearly as a very great wrestler. He, to me, is the epitome of what a technical wrestler is. He didn't do a lot of high flying. He didn't do a lot of hard impact and hitting and punching and kicking. He was a standard, very good wrestler. Now, was he interesting talking? Not very good. But he did have a very wholesome attitude. It takes 5 tools to be a great wrestler, and I'm probably going to do a video on that. He had maybe about 2, maybe 3 of those tools necessary to become a great wrestler. And he is a legend in actuality. He had wrestled many years for the WWE. He stayed there until about the late 80s, went away for a little while, maybe about 4 years, then came back and wrestled in the 90s, into another era of wrestling. So, to me, he's my earliest memory, and I believe he's one of the best wrestlers you could ever see. The best. There is no one better than him, honestly. And I know that, to me, I know there's a lot of other wrestlers, I know people are going to say them, but this is the one for me that I consider the absolute best at what he did. The second person I'm going to talk about isn't known specifically for his wrestling, but for his character. And that is Brutus the Barber Beefcake. This guy was absolutely off the wall. He wrestled very well. He was a great wrestler. But he was a character of a barber. He had his own place where he did, if you've seen like Late Night with David Letterman and anyone else, he had a little place set up called the barber shop where you sat down and you cut the breeze with him. He would ask you questions, and if you got on his nerves, he would beat you up and then cut your hair off. And that was the thing that got me. The guy used to cut people's hair off in the ring. He would have a match with you. He beat your ass, and once he beat you, he would grab a pair of scissors, grab your hair, and just start cutting the sucker off. And then you come to and you go, "What the heck? Get away from me with those scissors." That is how he was. He was highly charismatic. He was a great talker, and he was very good in the ring. That's easily 3 tools that you need to become a great wrestler. And to me, seeing him when I was growing up in the mid-80s, I just absolutely loved the guy. He just was the epitome of who was a great, fun, all-around wrestler. Now here's another wrestler. Now I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, now you're getting to a wrestler that we all know that was the greatest there ever was. To be honest, I don't believe he was the greatest, but I can understand the reason why. And this was Hulk Hogan. He was called Hulk Hogan for a reason. At the time, there was a TV series called The Incredible Hulk back in the 70s. And it had a bodybuilder, and it had a guy who was a comedian. Bill Bixby was a comedian, and Lou Ferrigno was a well-known bodybuilder. He got all in green. The guy was basically a monster of a man with huge muscles. And many people compared Hulk Hogan to him because he was about the same size as him. He wasn't all muscled out, but he was just large in size. So they called him Hulk Hogan, like the Incredible Hulk. In the 70s, he was well known. He was a bad guy at one point. But in the beginning of the 80s, going to the mid-80s, he turned from being a bad guy to a good guy. And he heavily influenced society. He went on television. He went to movies. He went to Late Night with Johnny Carson was a show at the time. That's like Late Night with David Letterman and Stephen Colbert and I forgot the other people's name. I don't normally watch them anymore. But he went on those shows. He sponsored wrestling. People looked at him. When you look at a lot of stars, a lot of singers, a lot of fighters like boxers, Muhammad Ali was known to work with Hulk Hogan. In actuality, they became close friends. Hulk Hogan knew his children, Muhammad Ali at the time. And he heavily influenced everything you could ever know about society and culture. We still feel effects of it today, what Hulk Hogan, Terry Hogan as he was being called at the time, when he's not wrestling, at least a little bit. It's not his full actual name, but he was known as Terry Hogan. But he truly changed everything about what society and wrestling had to offer. He was one of the most influential people you could ever see on television. Another person that was heavily influential was Randy Macho Man Savage, or the Macho Man. This guy was loved. If anyone's ever seen or eaten a Slim Jim, I probably have an image of it on my shoulder. It was a piece of meat that was like beef jerky, but it was in a long stick. This guy did a commercial saying, if you like this, you like me, snap into a Slim Jim. And you see him bite that sucker off. Unfortunately, I don't want to put it onto my video because they may copyright it. I don't want to go there. But essentially speaking, when it came to Randy Macho Man Savage, he was a great character. He wasn't as influential as Hulk Hogan was. He wasn't. But it doesn't mean he didn't make wrestling amazing and fun. And you just want to choke the guy because he was a bad guy. When he was a bad guy, he was a great bad guy that made you want to choke him out. And then he was a good guy. You want to cheer him on. He worked with a woman named Miss Elizabeth, who actually was his actual wife at one point. He made wrestling just amazingly fun. And I can't think of anyone else that shouldn't be on this list. The final one that I'm going to put on this list is someone that kind of, well, he was in the 80s, but he really took his stride in the 90s. But I have to say it here because it makes sense to put him here. And that is the Ultimate Warrior. I loved the Ultimate Warrior in the late 80s, early 90s. Just before I stopped watching wrestling for a little while due to the fact that I had to go to school, I had to get a job, I got married, and everything else went crazy. Before I stopped watching wrestling, I saw the Ultimate Warrior. And then on and off throughout the 90s, I did see him on and off. I just said on and off twice. But you get my point. The Ultimate Warrior was a wrestler that was great. He reminded me of Native American culture. Because when he did his bit and his talking about, I am the Ultimate Warrior, I have the warriors on my side, I have the gods by my side, and we will be there and win. how did he ever talk like that? He talked deep like that. That sounds like it'll hurt your voice. He reminded me of Native American culture. That to me at the time was very important. I didn't really know, and I still don't know if I have full Native American background as far as I can tell from my family heritage. Not being told much, from just seeing my relatives, there is Native American influence there. And I grew up with it in some form or another. And hearing him maybe have a stronger connection to Native American culture, maybe want to know more about it, even though at the time I didn't really go all the way into it because my wife at the time was learning to be a Jehovah's Witness and she wanted me to become one, and I kind of put that away. Now I follow it more, but then it still was important to me. When I was a little kid seeing it in the 80s, just before I became an adult in the 90s, I felt a strong connection to him. He was a great, well, not a great wrestler. He was just a very hard wrestler. He just knew how to talk to make you look at him. And he just was fun in the ring. But this is just my point of view of how Golden Age wrestlers have been for wrestling and what they did for society. But anyone else, leave a comment below. Tell me, and tell everybody else, who was your most fun and influential wrestler during the Golden Age of wrestling? Have a good day, have a good night, and look for the next episode of A Pro Wrestling Guide for Newbies.